Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. And man, I am glad to be back here with you all. Now, I know during the Super Bowl recap show, I told you all that I would do my best to put out an episode every single week during the offseason. And then all it took was 1 week into the offseason for me to fail to do that. So I believe I owe you a bit of an explanation. Last week, I didn't put out a podcast episode because I just didn't want to. No, just joking. The reason was I had a root canal. Don't worry, I'm totally fine. But there was a day in there where one side of my mouth was numbed up for a good 6 hours, and then life just sort of happened and just didn't have time to put out a podcast. So I apologize, but at the same time, you know what? This is the off season. This is the time to get your body right, time to get your mind right. You don't force it through injuries. You got to be ready for next season, got to be ready for training camp. And that's the decision I made. That's the decision that me and my people, we made together because of what was best for my future. All right? Now, I just want you all to know that if this had happened during the regular season or during the playoffs, I would have played through it. I would have taken the shot. And even though I wasn't 100%, I would have found a way to talk through it and give you guys the best damn podcast show I possibly could, given the circumstances. And I wouldn't have told you about it either at the time. I would have done what all NFL players do and kept my mouth shut until the end of the season. And at that point, I would start leaking out information that there were a few weeks during the season I wasn't 100%. And that way, I would have been able to give an excuse for why I didn't perform so well without explicitly telling you, hey, here's my excuse. You would have been able to draw your own conclusions. So that's what would have happened if it was during the season. But now we can move on. We can get into all the off-season topics and go full speed ahead towards next year. Now today, the first thing I want to talk about is a question I received in my DMs on Substack. And the question was, why do I think Sam Darnold's career has gone the way it has? Was it more an issue with Darnold, the player, his mental makeup, his physical skills, or was it more related to the situation he was in? Now this was an excellent question, and it got me thinking. And for some reason, the 1986 Eagles popped up in my head. Now, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. It won't be long, I promise. I'll get back to the matter at hand, but I want to go back to 1986, the Philadelphia Eagles, and Wade Phillips. Now, Wade Phillips, for those of you that don't know, he had a long NFL career as a defensive coordinator, a defensive coach, was a head coach several times, but his career spans the 70s when he was with the Oilers and going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, all the way to the last decade where he made a Super Bowl in 2015 with the Broncos and then 2018 with the Rams. So he's coached against the best. He's coached with the best. He's really seen it all. And he talked about a lot of that in his book, Son of Bum. Now, the reason it's called Son of Bum is because his dad is obviously Bum Phillips, the coach of the Oilers in the 70s and the Saints in the 80s. So he talked about a lot of his experiences in that book, coaching with his dad and coaching elsewhere throughout the NFL. I highly recommend the book. But one of the more interesting stories that he told was about the 1986 Eagles. And that team, their new head coach that year was Buddy Ryan. Now, most of you probably know Buddy Ryan. He was the architect of the 4-6 defense in Chicago, was a defensive coordinator of that 1985 Bears defense that just demolished everybody. They went 18-1, easily won the Super Bowl. And then after that season, he took the head coaching job in Philadelphia. So he asked Wade Phillips that season to come in and be his defensive coordinator and run the 4-6 defense with the Eagles. Now, the way Wade Phillips tells it, he liked Buddy Ryan. He liked his personality, liked coaching for him. But he said he's never met a coach who hates offense as much as Buddy Ryan does. Now, it makes sense that Buddy Ryan didn't particularly like offense or respect offense. He's a defensive coach. There's always that rivalry within the game between the defense and the offense. But he legitimately hated the offense. So much so that during practices with the Eagles that 1986 season, the Eagles offense would have a script of about 25 or 35 plays they were supposed to run through, and they'd get to play 10, and Ryan would tell them, all right, you've got 5 more plays. I can't watch any more of this. Not because the offense was particularly bad or anything like that, but because he just didn't want to see the offense on the field. He wanted to practice defense. He wanted the defense to get out there, the first-team defense to start working through their stuff. He would also do things like having his defensive scout team run some of his more intricate 4-6 blitzes against the number one offense in practice just to screw with them. And for those of you that don't know, the scout team, what they do is they run the next week's opponent's plays so that the offense has the ability to get used to seeing their looks and getting into the right checks at the line of scrimmage and running their plays against the specific fronts and coverages, etc. So no one else was really running the 4-6 defense at that time, and Buddy Ryan, because he wanted to torment the offense and hated what they were doing and just hated offense in general, started throwing out his fancy blitzes at the offense and surprising them in the middle of practice. And if you weren't absolutely certain that Buddy Ryan hated offense, just go and watch that documentary about the 1993 Houston Oilers. Ryan was a defensive coordinator at the time, and there was one game where the quarterback threw an interception before the end of the first half, and Ryan went over and threw a punch at the offensive coordinator, Kevin Gilbride. So again, this guy hated offense. Now imagine you're a quarterback trying to grow, trying to develop in that environment. It changes the way you play. It impacts you from a mindset standpoint, certainly. If the head coach is continually talking about the defense and we're a defense-first team and, hey, offense, just don't screw it up for the defense, you're going to be afraid to make mistakes. So it changes the way you play. It's going to change the risk-reward equation, the risks that you decide to take, the decisions you make. It's going to impact your ability to stretch as a quarterback because you can't grow as a quarterback. You can't learn. You can't develop if you're just going out there and playing to not make a mistake. You can't do that. You have to live on the edge as a quarterback and be comfortable enough to take chances when you need to take chances. Sometimes you're going to throw an interception. Sometimes the ball's going to get tipped. Stuff happens. You can't be afraid to make a mistake. No one at any position, in any sport is going to play well if they're afraid to make a mistake. So I bring that story up because getting back to Sam Darnold, he wasn't exactly in that type of situation like he may have been if he played for Buddy Ryan, but he definitely wasn't in a great situation early in his career. And that certainly impacted the trajectory of his career. I mean, just think about it. His first year, Todd Bowles is the head coach. I thought Darnold did some nice things at the end of that first year. Missed some time due to injury, but there were a couple games at the end of that season where I remember writing specifically about it and saying, okay, he's made some progress from earlier in the year. Todd Bowles then gets fired. They bring in Adam Gase, who I think we all know Adam Gase just was not a great head coach. But I'm not going to put all of the blame on Gase. Some of the blame goes to Darnold having to learn a second offensive system in his second season. Some of it goes to the personnel around Darnold. His receivers couldn't get open. They couldn't create consistent separation. And more importantly, his offensive line was just atrocious. And I remember specifically watching Darnold during that second season, and you could see he knew he didn't have time. That ghosts game against the Patriots on Monday Night Football, where he said he was seeing ghosts, that comes from a quarterback feeling like he's going to get hit. So you're not necessarily taking the time to read the coverage or read the defense because you're kind of out of the corner of your eye. You're keeping your vision on the pass rush. So you're not necessarily seeing the field. So you don't trust that there aren't defenders coming from underneath to pick off a pass because you're not seeing anything. And it affected him all through the rest of his career with the Jets. When you know that you don't have time to drop back and get to your first, your second, your third read, etc., it changes the way you play. You don't have the confidence to sit in the pocket and read things out. So what do? You try to predetermine where you're going to go with the ball. You walk up to the line, and before the ball's even in your hands, you say, I'm throwing it to this guy on the right. Hope he's open. And you saw that in Darnold. He would either throw the ball to his initial read or get the hell out of the pocket. But that led to him developing some really bad habits, and all of a sudden the talent that we all know Darnold has, it was completely irrelevant. He couldn't play the position. And you can't blame the Jets for moving on from him. You can certainly blame them for the lack of development, but what are you supposed to do as the Jets at that point? He looked like a completely beaten quarterback. So they moved on from him. They traded him to the Panthers. He spent 2 years in Carolina, and again, that was not a tremendous situation. Panthers haven't exactly been a stellar organization. Started off okay for Darnold. I think he went 3-0 in his first 3 games with the Panthers, and then the wheels sort of fell off. So after 2 years there and a couple more head coaches, because head coach Matt Rule was fired midway through one of those seasons, Darnold kind of took a step back. Went to be a backup quarterback for Brock Purdy and the 49ers. Got to learn the Kyle Shanahan system, got to play in that Kyle Shanahan system in practice. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan and his quarterback coach and other offensive coaches worked with Darnold to refine some things about his game so that if he did have to play, he'd be in much better shape. But clearly being in a much better environment in San Francisco, even though he didn't play, that settled Darnold down. He probably learned a thing or two. He clearly refined his game to some extent. Then the next year he went to the Vikings and played for Kevin O'Connell, refined his game even further and actually got to apply it on the field. Had a tremendous season. Vikings went 14-3, and with the exception of really his last 2 games of the season, Darnold was lights out. And then this past season, he gets to go play for the Seahawks, and Clint Kubiak is his offensive coordinator. Kubiak, of course, comes from that Shanahan school. Of course, his dad, Gary Kubiak, coached for Mike Shanahan, so it's generational with those 2 names. But that's 3 straight years in 3 straight systems with 3 straight offensive play callers who are at the cutting edge of offensive football and know how to get the most out of the quarterback position. So it's no surprise then that Sam Darnold suddenly plays well, and now he's a Super Bowl champion. So bringing it back to the question, has Darnold's career gone the way it has because of Darnold himself or because of the organization and culture and environment he's been in? And my answer is, I think it's the latter. There are very few quarterbacks who can transcend a bad system, a bad team, and have success anywhere they go. I'm talking about a handful of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. You're probably talking guys like Dan Marino, John Elway. Peyton Manning would certainly be one, not because of the physical talent he had, but because of everything else that he did. And by the way, we don't need to ask any questions about Peyton Manning and could he have done it had he gone anywhere else, because he was number 1 draft pick and went to a 1-15 team and quickly turned them around and made them a Super Bowl contender every single season, and wasn't doing it because he was leaning on the defense. These were offense-first teams that were completely built around Peyton Manning. And I'm getting a little off topic here, but on top of that, Peyton Manning went to 4 Super Bowls with 4 different head coaches, 2 different franchises. So I think we have our evidence here that he's one of those guys that would have been successful anywhere he went. But really, there's only a handful of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL that would have been good no matter where they went. So the answer to me when it comes to Sam Darnold is that the reason his career went the way it did was because of the situations he was in. So let's spin this forward to the offseason, because I think the question on so many people's minds right now is, who's the next Sam Darnold? Because Darnold doesn't feel like a fluke, does he? There have been a lot of quarterbacks out there over the last few seasons who have been able to resurrect their careers once they've been in better situations. Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith. I know Smith didn't do so well with the Raiders last year, but he turned things around when he was with the Seahawks a couple of years ago. Daniel Jones is another one. So who's that next quarterback? Who's that next quarterback that's going to surprise people, come out of nowhere, kind of resurrect his career, and become an effective starter in this league? Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to find a player who's been in that Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell, Matt LaFleur quarterback apprenticeship program. And I think if you look to Green Bay, you might have that guy. Malik Willis. Malik Willis, now he wasn't a top draft pick like some of the other names I just brought up, but he was a top prospect during the 2022 NFL draft, and that was mostly because it wasn't a great draft year for quarterbacks. But some people, because of his talent, he's always had great talent, some people thought, okay, he might be a first-round draft pick. You had a few analysts having him as the number 2 overall pick, saying that the Lions should have taken him. I don't know about that, but he was a top prospect that year. Now, he ended up getting drafted in the 3rd round by the Tennessee Titans, and his career with the Titans kind of went the way you would expect it to go for a 3rd-round quarterback. Wasn't ready to play. When he did get the opportunity, didn't look very good. And the Titans ended up trading him to the Packers after 2 seasons. Now, the reason everyone's so excited about Willis is because under Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, he has flourished. Now, it's been as a backup quarterback and in spot start duty, but just listen to some of these numbers. Willis has completed almost 80% of his passes with the Packers for nearly 11 yards per attempt, has 6 touchdown passes, no interceptions, a 134 passer rating. He's also added 241 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. He has been a nearly perfect quarterback when he's gotten on the field. Now, it's only been across 3 starts and 11 games and 89 pass attempts, but any quarterback who puts up that type of performance, even in that small of a sample size, still makes you open your eyes. And the reason I think teams are probably excited about Malik Willis is because he's extremely talented. He's talented as a thrower. He's very talented as a runner. For context, he's picked up a first down on 32% of his career runs. Lamar Jackson has picked up a first down on 36% of his career runs. And when it comes to throwing, over the last 2 years in Green Bay, Willis has attempted 15 passes traveling 20 yards or more from the line of scrimmage. Guess how many he's completed? 13. That's ridiculous. And last year, he completed all 7 of his attempts 20 yards downfield. So the potential that's always been there, you've seen it in bits and spurts with the Packers. It seems like it's coming to fruition. Or at very least, Malik Willis has the appearance of getting his game under control. Because that was always the question with him. Could he be more consistent? Could he be more accurate? Could he make better decisions? Could he play with better timing? And I think some of those numbers I just mentioned make you feel that the answer to that is a resounding yes. Can he make better decisions? Hasn't thrown an interception in 2 seasons with the Packers, 89 pass attempts. Can he throw with better ball placement? Well, he's completed nearly 80% of his passes. Can he play with better timing? I don't have any numbers to support this, but just watching him on film, he does throw with better anticipation on passes to the outside. So you've seen a lot of improvement, a lot of refinement, and that's not going to go away. What he's learned with Matt LaFleur and with the Packers, that's not going to escape his body as soon as he goes somewhere else, you would think. Now, it doesn't mean that Willis is definitely going to be a success wherever he goes. I think there are still some questions about him. The biggest one is experience. In 4 seasons, he's only started 6 games. He's thrown 155 total passes in his career. Again, that's not a lot. And that's a concern because I think the players similar to Malik Willis, guys who have a lot of physical talent, a lot of physical attributes, but who haven't been able to harness their talents at the NFL level, players like Anthony Richardson and Trey Lance, they haven't been able to do so because they didn't have a lot of experience heading into the NFL and they didn't play a lot once they got to the NFL for whatever reason. Injuries, not being ready. And so that's something that you definitely have to consider with Malik Willis. The other thing is that the amount of success he's had with the Packers, it's come in a context that is not going to be the exact same when he becomes a starting quarterback. A lot of his playing time has come as a backup, where he's going against defenses that have been preparing for Jordan Love all week, didn't have time to focus on Malik Willis because it's not like the Packers used him or had a package for him. He only played if Jordan Love got hurt. And so whenever he came into a game, it would completely catch the defense off guard because he's a different quarterback than Jordan Love. The read option becomes a factor. His legs become more of a factor. So defenses are instantly on their heels when they play against him, and they haven't prepared for him. And even in those games where he has gotten a start, he's gotten 3 starts with the Packers, 2 in 2024 and 1 last year. In those starts, defenses still didn't have much tape on him, or they didn't have much tape on how the Packers like to use him necessarily. And with a backup quarterback, an offensive play caller can go into that game and kind of do anything. If you have a player like Malik Willis who's as gifted as he is physically, you can play that game in a number of different ways. The defense can't get a feel for you going in. You can lean on play action. You can lean on read options. You can lean on your run game. And that's kind of what LaFleur did. Willis didn't throw a lot of passes in any of those starts. He threw 14 against the Colts, 19 against the Titans, and then 21 against the Ravens last year. Most of them were on play action. Last season, for instance, Malik Willis, 40% of his passes came off of play action. For context, Marcus Mariota led all qualified quarterbacks with 35% of his dropbacks coming on play action. So again, in short spurts, you can do that. You can lean on the threat of Malik Willis's legs or of the running game in general. And you can do excessive play action. You can call more gadgets and gimmicks and plays that you otherwise wouldn't call that the defense isn't prepared for. That's going to change when Malik Willis is a starter somewhere. You're not going to be able to do that for 17 games. Eventually, defenses are going to pick up on it. They're going to pick up on your tendencies. They're not going to be fooled by the play action quite as frequently. I mean, just think about it. Willis has never thrown more than 23 passes in a game. So we don't know what he's going to be like when he's got to throw 35, 40 times. We don't know what he's going to be like when the threat of the run isn't really an option, when it's third down, third and long, when his team is trailing, when it's 2 minutes at the end of the half or the end of the game, or when the running game's just not working in general. How is he going to react? No one really knows that. So as good as he's played with the Packers, whoever signs him, you're still going off a lot of faith that he's going to improve. And there are two more issues with that. One, there's not a lot of good quarterbacks out there on the market, either in the draft or in free agency this offseason. So for those quarterback-needy teams that are looking, Malik Willis is one of the best options. We all know Fernando Mendoza is probably going to the Raiders with the first overall pick. There are 4 or 5 other teams that are going to be in the market for a quarterback. They're all going to be competing for Malik Willis. That's going to drive up the price on him. In an ideal world, you'd love to sign him for a 1-year, prove-it deal, but you're not going to be able to do that because there are going to be multiple teams competing for his services. So you're likely going to have to overpay for a guy who has started 6 games in 4 seasons. And then on top of that, Willis is not going to be in a situation, no matter where he goes, that's as good as it was in Green Bay. Bottom line, he can't take Matt LaFleur with him. I know a lot of folks in Green Bay have issues with LaFleur's play calling or in-game situational management, but he's a damn good coach, and he's gotten the most out of every quarterback he's been with. And Willis isn't going to get to have him wherever he goes. He's not going to have those Packers weapons, which, again, despite not having a bona fide number 1, they do have a lot of depth. They do have a lot of good weapons and receivers and, like I said, play designs with LaFleur and running game with Josh Jacobs. That's a great situation to play quarterback in. Now, I guess he could go and play for the Cardinals with Matt LaFleur's brother, Mike LaFleur, who's now the head coach there. They've got some decent weapons. Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride at tight end. Mike LaFleur is not going to be exactly the same as his brother, but I'm sure they're going to talk. Have late-night calls talking about what Malik Willis likes to do on the field, how to get the most out of him. So that could be a good fit. Wouldn't be as good as it is with the Packers, but would be a pretty decent fit. He'd be in a hell of a tough division with the 49ers, Seahawks, and Rams. But offensively, it could be an okay situation. But you look at the other options, and I don't know how good it is. The Dolphins, look, Jeff Hafley, new head coach of the Dolphins, was the Packers defensive coordinator. Probably had a lot of experience facing Willis in practice. So if he's interested, that could be some form of validation in how good Willis is, how difficult he makes life for a defense. So that could be an okay situation. If the Browns go after him, Todd Monken's the head coach, and we all saw what Monken just did with Lamar Jackson, who's got a very similar skill set to Malik Willis. Led him to 2 MVP-caliber seasons. I'm sure the Jets will be interested in Malik Willis, although I don't know that will be mutual. I think the evidence is out there that no matter who goes to the Jets, whether it's a Hall of Fame Mount Rushmore quarterback or a rookie or someone trying to resurrect their career, they're going to have a hard time in New York with the Jets. So I don't know if Malik Willis would want to go there. If he does, how can you predict success with that franchise? Maybe there's a surprise in there like the Falcons. They might decide they can't wait for Michael Penix, and they can't count on him because of his injury history and don't know if he'll be ready for the start of next season. And if you think about it, Kevin Stefanski with a mobile quarterback like Willis and weapons like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, that could be sort of fun to watch. So I'll be honest, I'm kind of talking myself into this a little bit where I could see some of these situations working out for Malik Willis. But again, I do need to bring it all back. I don't think it'll be as good of a situation as he has in Green Bay, coming off the bench, catching defenses off guard as kind of a change of pace quarterback. But at the same time, I say, if you're in need of a quarterback in a year where there aren't a lot of great options out there, why not go after Malik Willis? He's somewhat unknown, but he's less of an unknown than most of the other options out there. And he's got a ton of upside. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. I do want to point out that in addition to all this conversation we just had about Malik Willis, I posted a breakdown of him on footballfilmroom.com this week. So you can see some of the plays that illustrate the points I was making about what are his strengths, what are his weaknesses. We're also running a sale right now on footballfilmroom.com, 40% off a founding member subscription. And remember, that founding member subscription gets you access to our playbook. And that playbook has over 85 different play breakdowns with hundreds of actual NFL play examples. And the playbook itself, we group everything by concept. So if you're interested in learning more about passing games, we show you a bunch of different passing concepts. If you want to learn about the run game, how teams use motion, formation, alignment on offense to be successful, different situational and conceptual breakdowns. We also have defensive stuff as well, different coverages, different types of pressure schemes. You can get all that to help learn more about football this offseason, which is what everyone should be doing. use the offseason to study up on one area that you don't know about or one area that you don't know as much about as you would like to. I think getting a founding member subscription will help you do that. We also have a ton of other content on the website. We'll be breaking down some of the draft prospects and some of the offseason stories. A lot of quarterback breakdowns. We'll get into over the course of this offseason how Jackson Dart played, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, plenty others. But I think that's everything I got, and I'll talk to you next time.